We all know how much the stuff happening right here where we live actually affects us, right? Like, way more than national stuff sometimes, I think.
It's true. I mean, all those decisions at the local level, they really shape our daily lives in so many ways.
That's why we gotta pay attention, right? To what's going on in our own towns and cities.
Absolutely. We have to be informed because that's how we can make sure things are moving in the right direction.
Exactly. And speaking of things happening right in our backyard, remember that whole discussion about Maywood maybe switching to a strong mayor form of government?
Yeah.
Well, there have been some interesting developments since we last touched on it.
Oh, yeah. Some pretty big updates, actually, including some stuff you, our awesome listeners, sent our way. Thank you for that, by the way. Some documents from the Coalition for Accountability, the CFA, plus some official communications from the village itself.
So, in this deep dive, we're going to try and get to the bottom of some of the claims and counterclaims that have been flying around about this potential change. We touched on this before, remember? But now we've got even more information to unpack, especially what's happened since our last chat.
Yeah, so as we dig deeper today, it's probably worth reminding everyone about what we discussed last time.
Right. Refresh our memories.
Exactly. So if you recall, we took a look at some of the initial arguments from Mayor Booker and the Maywood Together Party about why they think Maywood should move to this strong mayor system.
And then the CFA, remember those guys? The nonpartisan group that's all about just the facts. Well, they started looking into those claims.
And as we go through all this new info, it's important to keep in mind that in our last discussion, the CFA did a pretty good job of pointing out several instances where the information coming from Mayor Booker and the Maywood Together Party didn't actually line up with what they found to be true.
Yeah, like they were calling them out on some stuff, right?
Pretty much.
Things like the possible costs involved with making this big change and how different types of local governments actually work in practice.
Yeah, they help clear the air a bit around those initial arguments.
Well, right. It was definitely helpful to have them break it down for us. And now hold on to your hats, folks, because we have a whole new layer to this story. A website.
A website, huh? Sounds exciting.
It is, trust me. It's called www.maywoodforwardtogether.com, and it's become a major talking point lately.
Okay, I see. So what's so special about this website?
Well, first off, it says right there on the site, paid for by Community Forward PAC.
Okay, seems pretty straightforward, right? Like a standard disclosure.
You'd think so. Here's the catch. Somebody checked with the Illinois State Board of Elections.
Oh, I see where this is going.
And guess what?
No record of this community forward pack.
Bingo.
Wow. Okay, that's fishy.
Right. And you start to think, who's really behind this website?
And what are they trying to hide?
Exactly. And it gets even more interesting when you look into the details of when and how the website was registered.
Oh, this is getting good. Tell me more.
So get this, www.maywoodforwardtogether.com was registered pretty recently, like just this March, on the 13th to be exact, and it was all done through Squarespace.
Squarespace, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, you know that website building platform?
Right, I've used it myself. It's pretty user-friendly.
It is, and here's why this detail matters. Mayor Booker, he has a bit of a history with Squarespace. Like, he uses it for, well, pretty much everything online.
For everything, really.
Pretty much. His professional website, www.nathanielgeorgebooker.com, that's on Squarespace. Then there's his business, www.astuteculture.com. Guess what? Squarespace again.
Wow, okay. I'm sensing a pattern here.
Right, and it doesn't stop there. Community initiatives like www.healthymaywoodwc.org, even the Maywood Park District website, www.maywoodparkdistrict.org, all Squarespace, and of course the Maywood Together Party website itself, www.maywoodtogetherparty2025.com. You guessed it, Squarespace City over here.
So Mayor Booker is a big fan of Squarespace. Got it. But what's the connection to this Maywood Forward Together website?
Well, think about it. This guy uses Squarespace for everything. And then suddenly this website pops up supporting the strong mayor idea. And surprise, surprise, it's also built on Squarespace.
I see what you mean. It does raise an eyebrow.
And there's more. The Instagram and Facebook icons on the website, at first they didn't even link to real social media pages for the website, just those generic Squarespace landing pages.
Oh, come on. That's just sloppy. It's like they threw this website together in a hurry.
Right. But here's the real kicker, the detail that really connects this whole website to the village itself.
Lay it on me.
The contact information for the website, the admin, technical registration stuff, it all lists the village of Maywood.
Hold up. So the village of Maywood is officially listed as the contact for a website that's advocating for a specific outcome in this election.
That's what it looks like.
And wasn't there some kind of ethics thing about this?
You're exactly right. It's time to bring in the big guns, the State Officials and Employees Ethics Act. This is a serious piece of legislation in Illinois. It's all about making sure that people working in public service, our elected officials and government employees, are behaving ethically.
Right, we want our government to be trustworthy.
Exactly. So we got our hands on this really important memo dated January 2nd, 2025, from the Village of Maywood's corporate counsel, a guy named Attorney Scott F. Oler. And he sent this memo to a whole bunch of people: Mayor Booker, all the trustees on the village board, the village clerk, and the village manager. So it was meant to be seen by all the key players in village leadership.
Sounds pretty official. What did it say?
Well, in this memo, Attorney Oler very specifically talks about the Ethics Act and how it applies to using village resources when we're talking about referendums, like this whole strong mayor question.
So he's basically saying, hey, be careful how you use village resources when campaigning.
Exactly. And he even quotes the law, saying that village officials and employees may only disseminate factual information to a referendum question with village resources, citing Illinois compiled statutes 10 ILCS 5925.1.
Okay, factual information. That's the important part here.
Right, like they can give residents the basic facts about what's being voted on, but they can't use taxpayer money to try to sway the vote one way or another.
Which makes sense. It's not the village's job to tell people how to vote.
Exactly. And that section of the law, 10 ILCS 5925.1b, it actually says public funds cannot be used to urge any elector to vote for or against any candidate or proposition.
So no using your tax dollars to fund a vote yes campaign?
Nope. It's all about preventing people from basically using your money to campaign for their own political agenda.
That seems fair.
Right. So now put all that together. We got this website that's clearly pushing for people to vote yes. On the strong mayor thing, I mean, even the name Maywood Forward Together kind of implies a we're all in this together vibe.
Yeah, definitely pushing a narrative there.
Right. And we know the Village of Maywood is officially listed as the contact for the website.
Uh-oh.
Yeah. So the question is this a violation of the Ethics Act? Is the village using its resources to campaign for one side of this referendum?
That's a good question. And it seems like Attorney Aller was trying to warn them about exactly this kind of situation in his memo.
Totally. Like, here are the rules, guys. Please don't break them.
It definitely highlights how tricky this whole thing can be, especially when you're dealing with something as fundamental as changing the structure of local government.
Right. We're talking about the very foundation of how the village operates, so it's got to be done by the book.
Okay, so we've got this website, potentially a violation of the Ethics Act. What else is going on?
There's this big sign that's popped up outside the Maywood Library, the one that's all about supporting the strong mayor form of government.
I think I've seen it.
Yeah.
Pretty hard to miss, right?
Yeah, it's huge. And it says, paid for by Citizens for Maywood.
Citizens for Maywood. Sounds pretty grassroots.
It does, doesn't it? But guess what? Someone checked, yet again, with the Illinois State Board of Elections, and there's no record of any PayKate registered under the name Citizens for Maywood either.
Seriously. Another mystery group with deep pockets.
Looks like it. And there's one more interesting detail about this sign. It has a union logo on it.
A union logo. That's interesting. Which union?
The sign doesn't specify, but it definitely adds another layer to this whole thing.
Yeah, like who are these Citizens for Maywood? Are they connected to this union in some way?
It's a good question, and we don't have the answer yet. But this whole sign situation really makes you wonder, who's behind these pro-strong mayor campaigns, and why are they being so secretive about it?
Right. Why not just be upfront about who's funding all of this?
Transparency is key, my friend. Transparency is key.
Okay, so we've got the website, the sign, and this memo from the corporate counsel warning about ethics violations. What happened next?
Well, remember how that memo went out to a bunch of important people in the village?
Right, including the trustees.
Yep.
But Michael Jurisic is listed as the corporate counsel in the village communications we received.
They got some intel from what they call a reliable source.
Reliable source. Interesting. So Jurisic basically says that the Village of Maywood logo can't be used on political materials without approval from either the village board or the village manager.
Which is a pretty standard rule, right? You can't just slap the official village logo on your personal campaign materials. Exactly. And Jurisic also clarifies what form of government KTJ's municipal clients in Proviso Township are using. Remember KTJ, the law firm the village uses. Jurisic mentions that Maywood is currently operating with a statutory manager, which we already knew. But then he goes on to list the other municipalities in Proviso Township that KTJ works with: River Forest, LaGrange Park, and Western Springs.
And what forms of government do those towns have?
All of them have a mayor-council system with an appointed administrator or manager, which directly contradicts those claims from the Citizens for Maywood sign and from the Maywood Together Party that all the surrounding communities are already using a strong mayor system.
So he's basically saying, hey, check your facts before making those kinds of claims.
Pretty much.
So what was Mayor Booker's response to all of this?
Mayor Booker said that he talked to the individuals supporting the strong mayor change, and they've taken down any village logos from their campaign materials.
So he's acknowledging that there were village logos on those materials.
Seems like it. He also claims that the information presented at a Maywood community dinner and discussion event came literally word for word from a document provided by Klein, Thorpe, and Jenkins, the village's law firm, but without any images.
So he's distancing himself from the website, the sign, and the potentially misleading information presented at that event.
That's how it seems, yeah.
Interesting. So where do things stand with the CFA? What are they focusing on now?
Well, the CFA has continued to do what they do best, checking the facts. Remember those facts-checked documents they've been putting out? They break down a bunch of claims that have been made about the strong mayor form of government, and they compare those claims to, well, the actual facts.
Okay, give me some examples. What kind of claims are they fact-checking?
The CFA is reminding everyone that right now, the village manager is the one who handles all the hiring and firing, and elected officials aren't allowed to directly interfere with that process. You know, they can't just tell the village manager who to hire or fire because that's against the municipal code, specifically Section 30.04G.
So they're emphasizing that the current system has these checks and balances in place to prevent elected officials from abusing their power.
Exactly. In his reply, Mayor Booker says the Maywood Together Party wasn't involved in paying for or distributing any of this campaign stuff. He also says that people who were supporting the change, they took the village logos off their materials after he talked to them.
So trying to distance himself a bit.
Sounds like it. But here's the thing. Remember how that sign outside the library claimed all the nearby towns are already using a strong mayor system?
Yeah, it was pretty specific about that.
Well, the CFA did their research, and they put together a table that shows the forms of government for all the municipalities in Proviso Township. Turns out, only Stone Park has an aldermatic city system, which is a type of strong mayor setup.
And what about the other towns, the ones that were listed on that sign?
Well, according to the CFA's table and the email we got from Corporate Counsel Jerusik, those other towns like River Forest, LaGrange Park, and Western Springs, they all have either a standard mayor-council setup or a council-manager system, so not strong mayor.
Gotcha. So the CFA is basically calling out the Maywood Together Party on their misleading claims about the surrounding communities.
Exactly. They're really committed to setting the record straight.
Okay, so we've got all this information about the strong mayor proposal. What are the actual questions on the ballot?
Well, there are two referendum questions. The first one asks if we should adopt the strong mayor form of government, and the second asks if we should retain the current managerial form.
And what's the CFA's recommendation?
Based on everything they've learned and all the fact-checking they've done, the CFA recommends voting no on adopting the strong mayor form of government and yes on retaining the managerial form.
So they're basically saying, stick with what we have. Why is that?
They believe that the current system, with its checks and balances and the village manager overseeing day-to-day operations, provides better accountability and stability for the village.
Makes sense. They've been emphasizing the importance of checks and balances throughout this whole discussion.
Exactly. And there's one last thing we should mention. Remember that website we were talking about earlier, www.maywoodforwardtogether.com?
Oh, yeah, the one with the village of Maywood listed as the contact.
That one. Well, we also got to look at some of the images that were used on the website.
What kind of images?
Things like photos of community meetings, pictures of people working together, feel-good imagery.
And you think these images were being used to promote the strong mayor form of government?
It's hard to say for sure, but it definitely seems likely.
Right, especially given all the other stuff we've been talking about, the questionable funding, the lack of transparency, the potential ethics violation.
Exactly. It all paints a pretty interesting picture, doesn't it?
It really does. So where do we go from here? What's the takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think this whole deep dive has raised some really important questions about the transparency and the flow of information surrounding this very significant decision about Maywood's future.
Right, like who's really behind these pro-strong mayor campaigns and why all the secrecy?
Exactly. And if the information being presented is potentially misleading or even false, How can residents make informed decisions about something this important? I mean, we're talking about changing the very structure of our local government.
It's a big deal, and it erodes trust in our elected officials if they're not being upfront with us.
Totally. So for all of you listening out there, this is where you come in. We've laid out the information, shared what we've learned from the CFA, looked at the communications from the village. Now it's up to you to draw your own conclusions.
All right, don't just take our word for it. Look into these sources for yourselves, ask questions, talk to your neighbors, attend those community meetings, and make your voices heard.
And here's a thought to chew on. How do we create a system where residents have easy access to reliable, unbiased information about their local government? What steps can we take as a community to ensure that the information we're getting is accurate and that everyone feels confident in making informed decisions about their future?
Those are great questions, and I think they're crucial to the health of any community. It's about creating a culture of transparency and accountability.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So Maywood, stay informed, stay engaged, and keep those questions coming.
And keep sharing your insights and findings with us. We're all in this together, and your voices matter.